Hi guys! Salamat sa inyong patuloy na ginagawang pagsubaybay dito sa ating discussions about statics of rigid bodies. At ang ating magiging topic for today is all about resolution of forces into components. At naghanda ako guys ng tatlong problems para i-demonstrate sa inyo kung paano tayo mag-resolve ng forces into components. Sa earlier part ng ating presentation guys ay naghanda ako ng isang problem on how we are going to resolve a force into components which are mutually perpendicular. One, when they are the horizontal and vertical components. And on the later part ay naghanda naman tayo ng sample problem on how the forces may be resolved along two mutually perpendicular axes but they are not necessarily the horizontal or vertical components. Guys, puntahan natin itong problem na ito, no? So, ang first problem natin is all about computing for the x and y components of each of the forces shown in the figure. So, in the figure, we have here sets of forces acting on a plane that are directed with a given magnitude and the direction. There are forces whose directions are given in terms of the angle that they are making with respect to the reference x-axis, and some are expressed in terms of the inclination or the slope that they are making. But in this particular discussion, guys, I only decided to show solution to P and F representing the direction expressed in terms of the angle and one in terms of the slope. Kaya puntahan natin guys itong ating solution to the resolution of force P into components. So I have here our components of the force P. Our force P has a magnitude of 200 and inclined at 60 degrees with respect to the horizontal. So if we're going to draw our horizontal and vertical axis, the x and y, and so let us try to transfer this force from this point up to this point. Also the angle that this force is making with respect to the horizontal. Okay. Ang ating general rule guys in resolving the force into components is to come up with a parallelogram. And that can be done by drawing at this tip of force a line that are parallel to the x and to the y axis. So here is a line that is drawn parallel to the x axis, and this line is the line drawn parallel to the y axis. And so this side of the parallelogram will represent the x component of the P, while this side will represent the y component of P. So because we have here a rectangle, therefore this side of the rectangle will also be equal to this side, and hence this will be also called as P sub x. And you will notice that in this particular parallelogram, we have formed a triangle, a right triangle, whose sides are given as follows. We have the Py, the Px representing the opposite side of the angle 60 and the adjacent side of the angle 60 respectively, while this side P will represent the hypotenuse of the right triangle. And so if we're going to apply here the function of the right triangle so that we can solve for the x component, that the x component of P will be equal to P cosine of the angle or angle 60. And if we are going to substitute the magnitude of P as well as the cosine of the angle 60, therefore we shall have here a 200 multiplied by 0.5 dahil ang cosine of 60 is equal to 0.5. And so if this will be simplified, we shall be getting the x component of P, which is equal to 100 pounds. Similarly, we can also solve for the y component, since y component of P will represent the opposite side of the angle 60. Therefore, Py can be computed as P times sine of 60. And if again, the magnitude of P and the magnitude of the sine of 60 are substituted, therefore we shall have here 200 multiplied by the square root of 3 over 2, since we have here the function of sine 60 expressed in terms of the ratio. And so from here, this 200 and 2 will cancel. This becomes 100. So I will have here P sub y equal to 100 multiplied by the square root of 3. And so this is how a particular force can be resolved into components when the components are mutually perpendicular and the horizontal and the vertical axis. Okay, the second one is when the direction of the force is expressed in terms of the slope. I'll be solving for the components of F. So here is our F that has a magnitude of 448 and inclined at 1 vertical to 2 horizontal. So let us try to redraw it on our plane here. Let us imagine that this is our x-axis, and from here this is our y-axis. Let us try to redraw this F on this side. Therefore F will be transferred here, having a magnitude of 448. To draw the components of F, which are shown in this illustration, let us try to imagine that at the tip of F, we draw a line that are parallel to the x and y axis. So that from here, we have here line drawn parallel to the y axis, and similarly on the side, we draw line that is parallel to the x axis. This side of the parallelogram will represent the y component of P F, while this side will represent the x component of F. And because you have here a parallelogram, therefore this side will also be equal to the side, and hence this will also be equal to the y component of F. And so these sides are also equal to the side, and therefore you have here the x component of F. And if you're going to show here our slope of F, which has a slope of 1 vertical to 2 horizontal, let us try to transfer it here. So we have here 1 vertical to 2 horizontal. And so if we're going to determine the angle, this angle will also be equal to that angle. And so finding for the function of the theta, therefore let us try to express the function of theta. Here 1 is to 2, therefore this side will be the square root of 5. So if this will be our angle theta, therefore from the dimension of the right triangle, we can get the function of the angle theta, so that sine of theta is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, therefore that is equal to 1 over the square root of 5. Similarly, yung kanyang cosine naman will be equal to the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, and therefore it will be equal to 2 over the square root of 5, or simply it is equal to 2.24. Now from this magnitude of the function of the sine and cosine of the angle theta, we can now compute for the x component of F, so that F is equal to F cosine of theta. Now substituting the value of F as well as the function of the cosine of theta of 2 over 2.24, therefore our value of F will be equal to 448 multiplied by 2 over 2.24. At mapapansin natin itong 2.24 at 448 will cancel each other. And so the result will be 200 for this one, and so 200 multiplied by 2, this gives us a value of 400 pounds. Sa makatwid, itong x component ng F, will be equal to 400. And if we're going to solve for the y component of F, since y component is equal to F sine of theta, we just have taken the magnitude of the sine of theta equal to 1 over 2.24, substituting the value of F and sine of theta here. So we shall have here 448 multiplied by 1 over 2.24. Again, itong dalawa nito may cancel each other, so that the result will be equal to 200. 200 multiplied by 1 gives us a value of F sub y equal to 200 pounds. That now shows how we can compute for the components of the force when the direction of the force are given in terms of the slope. It would be good to consider finding or expressing the function of that in terms of the magnitude of the slope, and from there we substitute the value in the formula. So let us now try to go to the second problem. Our second problem is when we have the mutually perpendicular axes which are not necessarily the horizontal and vertical axes. So in this problem, we are required to determine the components of P along the x and y axis, which are parallel and perpendicular to the inclined plane. So we're given here a body that is subjected to two forces. Okay, the body rests on a plane inclined at a slope of 3 vertical, 4 horizontal, and the force P acts on the body at an inclination of 2 vertical, 3 horizontal, and a magnitude of 361. So in this particular problem, we are required to determine what is the component of this P that is parallel to this inclined plane and perpendicular to that plane. So the two mutually perpendicular axes are not necessarily the horizontal and vertical axis. So how are we going to do it? So let us try to simplify the illustration by drawing first our inclined plane in this direction. Okay, here is our inclined plane, and let us call this plane as our x-axis. The plane, okay, makes an angle of 3 vertical and 4 horizontal. Let us try to call that angle be defined by the angle beta. From the slope of the inclined plane, okay, we can compute for the side of this small triangle, and that represents, okay, a value equal to 5. And so we now draw the, okay, plane that is perpendicular to the x plane, and let us call this as our y plane. So let us imagine that this P is acting at the intersection of the x and y plane, okay, for us to simplify, okay, the analysis. Here's our P. P is acting at an angle 2 vertical, 3 horizontal. Let us try to imagine that this is acting at this point. So let us transfer this from here. And so here is our force P having a magnitude of 361. The force P makes an angle of 2 vertical and 3 horizontal. And let us imagine that that angle of inclination that this P is making with respect to the horizontal is called angle alpha. And so from here we can compute the inclined distance of the smaller triangle, and that gives us a value equal to square root of 13. And so let us try to imagine that we pass a horizontal line at the intersection of the xy plane. And so from this horizontal line, we can define what is the angle that the plane is making with respect to the horizontal, as well as the force is making with respect to the same horizontal line. Okay, imagine natin that this is angle beta, and therefore this angle will also be equal to beta. And if this angle is alpha, we expect that this angle is also equal to alpha. And so let us imagine that we are drawing our components of P along the x and along the y. And to do it, let us try to imagine that at the tail of P, we draw a line that are parallel to the x and y plane. So let us try to draw that this line is parallel to the x, and from here, we also draw a line that is parallel to the y. So that this component will be our x component of the P, while this component will be our y component of P. And because this is a rectangle, this side will also be equal to that side. And so this side is also equal to this side, which we shall be calling as P sub. And I believe that you can imagine that this angle, the total angle that this P is making with respect to the x-axis, and let us call this as angle theta. Now imagine natin that from that we have a triangle form. So this actually is a right triangle where the opposite side of theta is equal to py, and the adjacent side of this theta is equal to p sub x. And so if we're going to express the trigonometric function of this angle theta, okay, we can now express the py and the px. And let's start with our px. Pakita natin dito, yung px natin will be equal to p times cosine of angle theta. Ba? Kaya lamang mapapansin natin that this angle theta is the sum of alpha and beta. Therefore, we say here that theta is equal to the sum of alpha plus beta. So if we are going to substitute this theta here, so we shall have here Px equal to P times cosine of alpha plus beta. So maybe you can recall this term. This is actually the cosine of the sum of two angles, which can be expanded by the expression that cosine of A plus B is equal to cosine of alpha cosine of beta minus sine of alpha sine of beta. However, we need to express what is the cosine of alpha, cosine of beta, sine of alpha, and sine of beta. Tingnan natin. Alin ba itong alpha na tinutukoy? Yung alpha na tinutukoy, yun yung angle of inclination that this force is making with respect to the horizontal. Ito yun. And that is also equal to this one. And from this triangle, we can express the function of that alpha so that k sine of alpha is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, and that is equal to 2 over the square root of 13. Similarly, yung cosine naman ng alpha will be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and that is equal to 3 over the square root of 13. And the angle beta is here, representing this actually angle, but that angle is also equal to this angle, whose sides, okay, are equal to 3 and 4 and 5. And so the sine of beta can be expressed as 3/5, and the cosine of beta, okay, can be expressed as the ratio of the adjacent to the hypotenuse, and that is equal to 4/5. Now, if all of this will be substituted here, so we can now solve for the value of Px. So that substituting the value, let us try to substitute the value P, which is equal to 361. The cosine of alpha is already taken to be 2 over the square root of 13. So I have here over the square root of 13. Yung cosine of beta naman ay ito, 4/5. Kaya I have here 4/5 minus sine of alpha, which is equal to this one. Okay, 2 over the square root of 13. And sine of beta, which is equal to this one, 3/5. I have here 3/5. So if we're going to simplify this equation, you will notice that the term inside the bracket have a similar, the same denominator. So getting the denominator to be multiplied by the square root of 13, and then simplifying the numerator, we shall have here 361 multiplied by this product will be subtracted by that product, and this is actually equal to 12 minus 6 is equal to 6 over 5 multiplied by the square root of 13. But the square root of 13 is approximately equal to 3.61, and hence 361 and 3.61 will cancel, at matitira dito is 100. 100 and 5 will also cancel each other, at ang matitira naman 20 na lang, diba? Kaya 20 multiplied by 6, this gives us a value of 120, and the direction of the component is directed up to the left, so I have here up to the left. So that's how we compute for the x component. While the y component, which is represented by this one, will represent the opposite side of the theta in this green shaded triangle. And so if we're going to solve for the y component will be equal to P multiplied by sine of theta. Again, ano ba yung theta? Theta is the sum of alpha and beta. And so you have here theta being the sum of alpha plus beta. Therefore, we can expand this sum and difference of two angles, diba? Therefore, sine of A plus B will be equal to sine of A cosine of B plus cosine of A sine of B, diba? And again, we already have computed all of these terms, which are already indicated here, diba? Kaya, pag kinupit natin yung Px natin, substitute natin yung 361, ano itong ating sine of alpha? You have here 2 over the square root of 13. Itong cosine of beta is 4/5. Ito yon, di ba? Plus cosine of alpha, which is 3 over the square root of 13, and sine of beta, which is 3 over 5. So I have here 3 over 5. Again, if you are to examine, the term inside the bracket have the same denominator. So we simply add the numerator, which are the product of 2 and 4 and 3 and 3. So I have here 2 times 4 plus 3 times 3, and the product is 17. Therefore, this becomes now equal to 361 multiplied by 17 over 5, the square root of 13. Again, yung square root of 13 is approximately equal to 3.61. So, if 3.61 will be cancelled with this one, ang matitira na lamang dito is 100. And 105 will also cancel each other. So, matitira is 20. So that I will have 20 multiplied by 17. This gives us a value of 340 and directed in the k-dash direction down to the left. So that is how we compute for the components of the force, particularly if the directions of the forces and the planes are expressed in terms of the slope. At mapansin niyo, hindi ko ginamitan dito yung angle, but I rather use the function of that angle because sides of the directions are indicated in terms of the slope. Kaya ginamitan natin ito ng kanilang function. Diba? So, magpatuloy tayo sa pamagitan itong third problem natin at medyo itong third problem natin ay interesting, Okay. So, in this problem, meron tayo ditong sinasabi na, okay, the x component of P is given at 894. Okay, determine the value of P and its y component. In the figure, we have here our illustration. So, we have here two mutually perpendicular axes x and y which are inclined at 1:2. The value of the inclination of x is 1:2, while that of P that crosses the intersection of the x and y is inclined at 3 horizontal, 4 vertical. At ang sabi dito, ito daw P kapag in-resolve into components along x and along y, meron siyang component that are directed along the x given at 894. Ang ipinapahanap sa atin, ano yung magnitude itong P at ano rin ang y component ng the same value, the same force P. Diba? So sa makatuwid, in this particular case, we are given the component. And from the component, hinahanap natin yung magnitude ng P at yung magnitude ng isa pang component when that P is resolved along the two mutually perpendicular axes. Not necessarily the horizontal and the vertical axis. And how are we going to start with the problem? Siguro, mas maganda ay puntahan muna natin itong illustration. Dito muna tayo mag-concentrate sa illustration nito. Okay? Imagine natin that, okay, we try to indicate the, this inclination, that the x is making with respect to the horizontal. At tawagin natin yung kanyang inclination as beta. Okay? Sa makatwid, if we're going to draw a horizontal line that passes through the intersection of the x and y, itong beta na ito will also be represented by this angle beta that the x is making with respect to the horizontal line. Diba? Similarly, let us try to imagine, okay, this force P. Itong P na ito, tawagin na itong angle na ito is alpha. Diba? The alpha, the P that is making with respect to the horizontal. Sa makatwid, itong alpha na ito can also be defined by this angle. Itong angle na ito mula sa horizontal. We call this also as an angle alpha. Diba? And if we're going to resolve P into components that are directed along the x and along the y, let us try to imagine that we pass a line parallel to the y at the tip of P. Similarly, we also pass a line parallel to x at the tip of the same force P. So that this component mula dito hanggang doon will represent the y component of P. At mula dito hanggang doon will represent the x component of P. Na kung saan itong x component, yun yung given na 894. Take note that this P is also the same as this side. And this Px is also equal to this side. Kaya nakabuo ngayon tayo dito ng parallelogram. At gusto kong tinanin nyo that we have here formed this triangle where Py, Px, and P are involved. However, we don't know this angle. If we will be able to express this angle, then we can express the relationship between Py, Px, and that of P plus this angle between x and P. Let us try to imagine that angle be called as theta. So, tingnan natin itong angle na ito. If we have here 3, 4, therefore this particular side will be equal to 5. Therefore, we can express the function of this alpha so that sine of alpha will be equal to 4/5 and cosine of alpha will be equal to 3/5. Diba? Similarly, kung titignan natin itong triangle na ito, I have here 1, 2, we expect that this side of the triangle will be square root of 5. And from there, we can express the sine of beta. So that sine of beta will be 1 over the square root of 5. And cosine of beta will be the ratio of 2 over the square root of 5. Diba? Kaya kung sosolve natin yung problem natin, because we are given the x component of p, we can express the relation between px, the p, and this angle theta, so that px will be equal to p cosine of theta. However, makikita natin na yung theta na ito will be equal to the difference between alpha and beta. And so I have here cos alpha minus beta. And if this will be substituted here, ano makikita natin? I have here px equal to p times cosine of alpha minus beta. And so we have here the function of the difference of two angles. And how are we going to express this function? The cosine of alpha minus beta. This will be equal to cosine of alpha, cosine of beta. If this is minus, therefore we have plus sine of alpha, sine of beta. Where this cosine of alpha, cosine of beta, sine of alpha, sine of beta are already expressed here as the functions of those small angles alpha and beta. Now, if we're going to substitute the value of px, which is given at 894, and the values of these functions of alpha and beta, therefore we can solve for the value of p. And let us have it substituted one by one. Our px is 894. Our cosine of alpha is there, 3/5. So I have here 3/5. The cosine of beta is here, 2 over the square root of 5. So I have here plus, so I also have here plus. Sine of alpha is here, 4/5. I have 4/5. And sine of beta is here 1 over the square root of 5. So look at this, the term inside the parentheses, they have the same denominator, which is equal to 5, the square root of 5. Therefore, we can simply add their numerators as the product of 3 and 2 plus the product of 4 and 1. And so I will have here 3 and 2 will be 6, 4 and 1 will be 4. Therefore, I have 6 and 4 is 10. 10 and 5 will cancel. So what we have here is 894 multiplied by 2 over the square root of 5. And when you simplify, you can solve for p as equal to 1,000 pounds. Now, after you have computed for p, we can now solve for py using the same triangle. So that py is equal to p multiplied by sine of theta, because we already have solved for p, and we know that theta is the difference between alpha and beta. So we have here py equal to p times sine of alpha minus beta. We try to expand this sine of alpha minus beta, and that is equivalent to sine of alpha cosine of beta minus cosine of alpha sine of beta. And if this values will be substituted with this one, so we shall have here p sub y equal to 1,000, which is already computed here. Sine of alpha is again 4/5. Cosine of beta is 2 over the square root of 5. Cosine of alpha is 3/5 here. And sine of beta is 1 over the square root of 5. And again, the denominators are the same. So, we can just combine the numerator as the difference between 8 and 3. 8 minus 3 is 5. 5 will cancel also. This becomes, therefore, 100 multiplied by 1 over the square root of 5. And when this is simplified, this gives us a value of 447.2136 pounds. I hope guys that you are able to follow my example, at sana ay tuloy-tuloy nyo akong sundan sa pamamagitan ng pag-subscribe sa ating channel, o kaya kung meron ka namang kaibigan na sa palagay mo mangangailangan ng ganitong discussion, share it to them so that they will also know this discussion that I have with you today. Once again, thank you very much for watching.